Some of the things we measure, I mentioned followers, fans, visits, sentiment. One of the things that we tried to create to be, to dig a little deeper is positive, negative customer interactions. This last bullet is an old bullet. I should get rid of that. We were looking for increases in hits, fans, followers in 2011. And remember I mentioned that we had a couple of storms where we saw the percentages bump up by 10% in both Twitter and Facebook reach. Well, it makes that kind of a goal obsolete, because then I guess you're rooting for bad stuff to happen so you can hit your goals. So I learned the hard way there that it's not an effective means of measuring social media to set a goal like that. This is a graph that just shows, obviously I picked one where something really good had happened, so we had lots of positive tweets on the subject, but that's an ongoing thing, and I'm always interested in hearing what other people are measuring. I don't think people are too different, and I'll back up here. I don't think people are diverging too much from what we measured, but I'm always interested in other utility metrics. I think I have reached the end of my presentation. Got some contact info here for MLGW and myself.
The question is, to what do you attribute Twitter's following? In other words, what do you attribute Twitter as being so good for you to use? What are the reasons? Have you thought about that?
It is interesting because Facebook is probably still more utilized than Twitter. I haven't seen the most recent statistics, but the only thing I can think of is that, especially in an outage type of situation, quick bursts of information work best. And that works best on Twitter rather than Facebook. So I think that's probably the most likely. That, and I think for especially a couple years ago, Twitter was a lot more mobile phone friendly than Facebook. And things have caught up now where everybody's got a smartphone. But if you go back about 2.5, 3 years ago, Facebook wasn't nearly as mobile friendly as it is now. So I think Twitter to me is a step up from texting, and I think that when you look at situations in which we've used Twitter the most, which are emergencies and outage situations, that it lends itself better than Facebook.
Could you give us more information on how you use backups, how you set it up, what they do, how you manage it?
Sure. Well, for example, someone may go on, one of my admins may go on vacation or call in sick, and usually if someone calls in sick or is going to be out on vacation, I usually have my other admin, they serve as a backup for each other. They are the two people most versed in social media. But if for some reason they're not available, I've got several other people who are trained and able to step in and make sure that that's covered. Also, when we have a large-scale outage and they've worked a lot of hours, I have to send them home to get some rest, and then we've got to have somebody else take over. When we've had a large-scale outage, and that's our primary emergency here because we get some pretty severe thunderstorms and tornadoes. But when we have those, I usually line out my schedule each day, starting in the morning, and I'll provide, the backups know who they are, and I'll let them know, hey, you're going to be on at this certain point because I've got to send someone home. I've got to send them home or let them sleep in and come in at noon or something like that. So it's very situational, but I will say that there's a number of people in my area who can back them up.
Anybody want to talk about anything or mention anything? Otherwise, yes, please.
How did you discover him?
I actually have a client in the utility space, and I thought, I wonder what, it's so profoundly different from anything I've ever done. I thought I'd better look and see what other utilities are doing. And I happened on it, and I thought, 20 people? And who's doing this? And he's very modest about what he's done. But the funny thing is that if you want to work with a company like this, which is highly regulated, I would never let anybody go out without having a very strong set of policies and guidelines. This is not for a small company. A small company is different. And they don't have any of that. In fact, I asked him, I said, so where are your guidelines? And he said, oh yeah, it's in HR. It's been there for a year and a half. That's really unusual. So anyway, that's how I found him. I actually spend a lot of time looking for examples. I can't always tell who's going to be a good speaker. But he had a great program, and he was very nice to help. Okay, yeah.
I couldn't quite figure out how they sort of coordinated. Like you told us different people were in charge of things, but...
So he's the head of the communications department. They all report to him.
So you think that then essentially they have a communications strategy, yes, and then the social media people are executing on that?
The social media part of it. They still do releases. They still do traditional PR. And he manages all of it. The social media is the part that's the more glamorous part. Yeah.
He talked about Hootsuite as a
Hootsuite. Hootsuite is an older tool. I personally prefer TweetDeck, but the problem is that when you start, it's the hot tool, and then when you go back to teach again, it's like, so you just got to stay up with it. I want to show you something, Catherine. Maybe not the whole class. The class can probably go, but I also measure sentiment for a client, and what it does is it tries to give you a statistical picture of what's happening in your universe, and it doesn't deal with sarcasm well. The other thing I discovered is that you better have a pretty big universe, or it doesn't pay all that money to find out that 3 people have made a post, every other month.
9 times each.
Yeah, I use something called Spark, if anybody is interested. I also use Meltwater. Meltwater is much better for publications. And sentiment stuff is still not very good. The technology isn't there yet. But if you work for like Procter & Gamble or Dell or HP, maybe you need to use it.